let's talk about another way of building sentences. In the last video, we talked about connective steps. This time, we're going to talk about subordinative steps. The way to add a subordinative step to a sentence is to use what's called a relative clause. So let's talk about what those are. A relative clause is a subordinate clause, which means a secondary idea, not the main idea, but a secondary idea in the sentence that begins with a relative pronoun. There are 7 relative pronouns: who, which, that, whom, whose, where, and when. So a subordinative step is when a writer uses a relative pronoun to add an idea to a sentence. However, the subordinative idea is clearly secondary in importance to the base clause. And you'll see what that means in a minute. The subordinative step can be added in the middle or at the end of a sentence, but it can't start a sentence. So let's look at some examples. So our first base clause says, "The snow began to fall." So to add on to this, using a subordinative step, we have to use one of those relative pronouns. One that would make sense here is which. The snow began to fall, which made the drive home dangerous. So this would be our subordinative step, because the way the sentence is structured, this is still clearly the main idea. This is a secondary idea. It's less important than this main idea. The snow began to fall, which made the drive home dangerous. You can see that if there was a hierarchy of ideas in this sentence, which ones the sentence need, this is the main idea, clearly. The snow began to fall. If, however, we use a connective step, as we do here, then the two ideas are put in an equal position, because the and makes them equal. The snow began to fall and the roads became slippery. They're sort of equally important, but the relative pronoun makes the secondary idea less important. Let's look at the second one. Kendall drove home when her shift at work ended. So this is our relative pronoun here. And again, this is a secondary idea to this. This is our base clause, our independent clause. This is a dependent clause. That's another difference between these two. Up here, that's an independent clause and that's an independent clause. That's why they can both be equal. But this is not an independent clause. It's a dependent clause. So it's less important than the independent clause. Lastly, Nellie elbowed the opposing player, whose nose began bleeding profusely. So here's our relative pronoun. So that's our subordinative step. This is our independent clause over here. It's our main base clause. This is a secondary clause. It's less important. It's in the hierarchy, it's beneath the main clause. So that's how you add a subordinative step. Mindeman out.